Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're on a critical two-part mission. First, we are plunging straight into the raw, and let's be honest, often ugly mechanics of digital toxicity. We're going to be looking specifically at how harassment and organized bullying really operate on platforms like Twitter. We'll examine the legal and personal wreckage they leave behind, and really scrutinize the platform's systemic failure to govern any of this behavior.
And that failure leads us right to the second part of our mission, because when these huge centralized platforms fail, independent resilience becomes, well, it becomes necessary. So from there, we pivot. We're going to analyze a really unique high-velocity media ecosystem that was built directly in response to all this conflict. It's called the Cyber Midnight Club, created by cybersecurity expert Alberto Hill. So this isn't just a story about toxic behavior online. It's really a blueprint for building high-trust media that is designed to survive in the digital war zone we've all kind of created.
Yeah, and we have some really complex material here. It covers everything from behavioral psychology and algorithmic incentives all the way to forensic investigation and international legal cases. We're basically synthesizing patterns of conflict and then studying this model of radical authenticity that's designed to combat it.
So the big question is really twofold. First, why is Twitter so uniquely hostile? And second, how did one person manage to channel, profound digital trauma and technical expertise into this massive, credible, and resistant media enterprise?
We are jumping right into the heart of the digital battlefield.
So to start, the environment of Twitter, or X as it's now called, it's just inherently optimized for confrontation, from the ground up. There's this great observation that it's maybe the only place online where you can state a universally acceptable opinion, right? Something like, we should probably avoid punching newborn babies.
Yeah, seems pretty safe.
You'd think so. But you will still find immediate, vehement disagreement. You'll get 100 replies demanding you check your privilege. The architecture itself, it fosters confrontation.
And that's a great anecdotal summary, but what's really sobering is that the institutional data backs this all up. This isn't just about random online debates.
Yeah.
We have some really significant findings, especially from Amnesty International, that confirm this hostility translates into real systemic harm.
Oh, yeah. That study was a big one.
It was. Amnesty conducted I think it was a 16-month study based on interviews and research, and they concluded very clearly that Twitter is simply not respecting women's rights. It fails repeatedly to provide adequate remedies for the threats and abuse women receive, even though it have policies that, technically prohibit that abuse.
And what's fascinating there, or maybe infuriating, is how the platform handles accountability.
Right.
When Amnesty asked Twitter to make its data public, the specific granular data on how it responds, how many reports get actioned, what kind of content leads to a suspension.
They refused.
They declined, yeah. They referred back to this formal, very vague response, basically saying the report does not clearly define problematic content.
Which is just a complete deflection.
It's the crucial systemic failure, that ambiguity. By refusing transparency, Twitter maintains this operational opacity that lets severe abuse just flourish while they selectively enforce rules against, the easier targets.
And this opacity, combined with the psychological distance of the internet, it just creates the perfect storm for toxic behavior. The psychological shield of anonymity is a core factor here.
Absolutely.
The Pew Research Center's findings confirm that anonymity, or even just using a burner account or a pseudonym, it dramatically encourages abusive behavior.
It's the old adage, right? The troll feels 10 feet tall and bulletproof behind a keyboard.
Exactly.
And that phrase just perfectly captures the psychological disinhibition effect. When you remove all that social friction, the potential for real-world consequences, eye contact, tone of voice, the filters just drop.
And this isn't just about general rudeness, is it? The abuse women face is often incredibly severe and targeted.
Oh, it's highly targeted and often sexualized. The source material we have cites these truly shocking examples of harassment, including direct sexual and physical threats. Things like, I hope you get raped again.
It's unbelievable.
That is the kind of material that should result in an immediate, permanent ban, no questions asked. And yet, it persists.
And we see the hypocrisy of the enforcement all the time. When platforms do try to apply some governance, the execution is just completely inconsistent, which completely destroys user trust. We saw this with the actress Rose McGowan, for example.
Right, that was a classic case.
She got suspended for sharing an email that contained a phone number. It's a clear, specific, but you could argue a pretty minor policy violation.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, you have hundreds of accounts making direct death and rape threats that often remain active. It just illustrates this severe lack of policy standardization and transparency.
So users learn the rules are arbitrary.
Exactly. And that encourages the repeat offenders who know the platform won't be consistent in stopping them.
And that inconsistency, it just fuels the fire. If you feel the rules are arbitrary, you assume the risk is low. So if the troll feels bulletproof, they need an efficient weapon to maximize the chaos. And on Twitter, that weapon is, without a doubt, the quote tweet feature.
Ah, yes. This is where the algorithmic design becomes so crucial to the whole mechanic of harassment.
It's the foundation of it.
Absolutely. The quote tweet is, it's a foundational mechanism for how mass digital harassment spreads. It makes it distinctly different from the old pile-ons you'd see in long, hidden comment sections on blogs or old forums.
Well, think about the pure efficiency of it. A quote tweet lets a user instantly share someone's original post, the target's content, while pairing it with their own hostile commentary or ridicule or even a threat. And critically, this ensures the conflict gets maximum visibility. Trolls have strategically weaponized this because it exploits the platform's own engagement metrics.
Okay, let's unpack that algorithmic incentive a bit. Why is the quote tweet the weapon of choice instead of just, hitting reply underneath the original tweet?
Because a direct reply mostly shows up only to people who follow both of you in the conversation, or, if the thread goes viral,
Right. It's contained.
it's contained. But a quote tweet delivers the criticism and the original target's content directly into the main timelines of all of the troll's followers. It doesn't matter if those followers follow the original target or not, it maximizes the spread of the hostility.
So it's fundamentally a broadcast mechanism for conflict.
It is. It's designed to generate a response, a hot take reaction, and Twitter's algorithms, they notoriously prioritize content that generates high engagement and high conflict. So that quote tweet gets pushed way higher than a simple, polite reply would.
The algorithm literally rewards broadcasting conflict.
Mhm.
And our sources point out that these trolls, they rarely engage in the comments. They exclusively use quote tweets to make sure they get maximum visibility to their massive, often mobilized follower base.
So they can start this swift and wide harassment campaign without ever having to engage in the messy work of an actual dialogue.
It's drive-by bullying, perfectly optimized for the timeline.
And this leads us to the unique nature of what's been called the troll Twitter phenomenon. It's a new form of systematic bullying that's incredibly effective because it carries this illusion of moral authority.
What's really fascinating here is how the source material distinguishes this group from the traditional, purely nihilistic or maybe far-right shock value trolls that really dominated the internet maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's a different breed. The material identifies this contemporary group as being predominantly on the far left. They often identify as communists, socialists, or anarchists. And their approach is entirely different because they're trying to claim the moral high ground. They aren't just trying to shock you, they're trying to justify their cruelty.
And the tactic they use is often called punching up. They weaponize concepts of social consciousness or wokeness to create a kind of rhetorical shield for themselves.
Precisely. They use all this jargon to justify their cruelty. They're trying to create the illusion that their targets are privileged or problematic or otherwise deserving of harassment. They might, successfully dig up something controversial the target said years ago, and then they frame the massive bullying campaign that follows as holding people accountable.
Or dismantling privilege.
Exactly. And that shifts the entire ethical focus away from their own abusive behavior and onto the target's perceived moral failing.
But if we look closer at the source material, the reality is often much more cynical than some kind of righteous indignation. A lot of the time they're targeting things that are genuinely harmless or maybe just cringy content that someone found embarrassing.
It seems like the social consciousness angle is often just a cover. It's a shield to let them engage in this high-intensity venting and attacking. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this moral facade is vital. It's vital because it allows the toxicity to maintain the appearance of justice, which makes it incredibly hard to police from the outside and easier to normalize on the inside.
So if you're participating in one of these harassment campaigns, but you convince yourself you're doing it for a good cause, like correcting historical wrongs or exposing a hypocrite, you feel entirely absolved of the guilt that comes with cyberbullying. You're not a bully, you're a revolutionary.
That rhetorical shift is terrifying. because it means the most damaging behavior is often carried out by people who believe they are the good guys. So once a target is successfully framed as, problematic or deserving of scorn, the machine kicks into high gear. It starts with what the sources call historical dredging. And this is where the systematic destruction of a reputation begins, often using material that's years or even a decade old.
The cycle is methodical, and it's psychologically devastating. First, the target tweets something visible. Second, the troll quote tweets it with maximum hostility to mobilize their followers. Then the target reacts.
Inevitably, yes. The target reacts defensively or tries to explain themselves, a reaction the trolls just feed on. And fourth, the trolls use advanced Twitter search features, external tools to meticulously dig up old content. They'll go back 10 years, just relentlessly scouring the account for anything that can be remotely framed as problematic by today's evolving standards.
The intent there is so clear. They hold these decade-old tweets up to today's constantly shifting social standards, and they completely ignore the fact that people change, they grow, they evolve their viewpoints.
It's character assassination, and it's justified by this kind of temporal hypocrisy designed to retroactively frame the victim as a bad person who is entirely deserving of the abuse they're currently getting.
The irony is just rich, and it really speaks to the power imbalance here.
Well, the sources note that the trolls' own accounts are frequently suspended for hate speech or policy violations, sometimes permanently.
So they have no history.
Which means they effectively have no visible history left to be dredged. They are immune to the very mechanism of accountability they weaponize against other people. It's not a fair playing field at all.
And when the target, who is usually someone with a traceable long-term identity, responds, or tries to apologize or explain the context of some old tweet, the trolls immediately move into psychological warfare. They start gaslighting.
Exactly. They'll claim the target is taking them too seriously, or that they're obsessed or spiraling, or that they can't take criticism. This tactic minimizes the actual harm being done. It serves a core tactical purpose.
Which is what?
By asserting that cyberbullying isn't real because you can just log off Twitter, they dismiss the massive real-world impact of libelous claims, of job losses, reputational damage, and hundreds of daily hate messages.
They're trying to absolve themselves of guilt completely.
And maintain their power. This downplaying allows the trolls to distance themselves from the consequences and maintain their feeling of righteousness and control over the target's reputation and mental state. It ensures the victim is perpetually on the defensive and loses control of their own narrative. It is psychological warfare.
Let's look at some specific, high-profile examples of how quickly this viral toxicity escalates and the incredible real-world power imbalances at play. We should start with the New Jersey e-girl case.
This is just a devastating illustration of how flimsy the justification for mass organized harassment can be. This young woman, she gained sudden viral fame, not for political content, but just for being an attractive, engaging personality with a really distinct New Jersey accent.
Right, I remember.
Within 24 hours of her becoming visible, a troll quote tweeted her, leveling the most damaging political libel you can imagine, calling her a white supremacist.
And what was the sole concrete piece of evidence for this massive accusation?
She followed a few conservative figures on Twitter, people like Blair White and Ben Shapiro. That was literally it.
Which, as you said earlier, following someone isn't an endorsement. It's often just a way to stay informed, even on opposing viewpoints.
But that was enough for the mob. That libelous claim racked up over 46,000 likes. She got hate from thousands of accounts. The viral power was so intense that she was eventually forced to make a lengthy YouTube video just to defend herself against this completely false yet entirely viral accusation.
That just demonstrates the incredible systemic failure. A baseless accusation, fueled by the quote tweet mechanism, can destroy someone's reputation instantly. Yeah. And it requires this massive expenditure of personal emotional labor just to stand still.
And the degradation of discourse reaches its absolute extreme with the Chrissy Teigen miscarriage attack. After she suffered a late-term miscarriage and posted about her grief, trolls engaged in behavior that just defies normal human empathy.
It was horrible.
They mocked her grief publicly, calling her behavior weird, claiming the images she posted were a staged photo shoot, and then they accused her of clout chasing.
I mean, that is behavior that would be utterly unthinkable in any analog setting. You just would not approach a grieving mother in public and accuse her of faking her pain for attention.
Precisely. It highlights how the psychological distance of the platform just removes all empathy and normalizes cruelty to the most extreme degree. The platform acts as a kind of moral fog, allowing people to participate in behavior they would otherwise find abhorrent.
And we also see this consistent targeting of specific professional groups. Female sports journalists, for instance, get a constant barrage of misogynistic comments, sexual and physical threats.
The sources cite Sarah Spain, who outlined the experience of her and her colleagues, and this points right back to the platform governance failures.
How so?
Spain cited one specific harasser who created over 30 separate accounts just to target her. 30. I mean, think about what that suggests about the platform's security and enforcement. It underscores a fundamental systemic failure to stop determined repeat offenders. If someone gets banned, Twitter lacks effective KYC, know your customer policies, or reliable IP banning to prevent them from just creating a new account in minutes and starting the harassment cycle all over again.
So the platform is designed to allow determined abusers to continue indefinitely.
These continuous failures, both behavioral and technical, they just demonstrate the desperate need for consequences. And since the platform and, frankly, the state struggle to provide effective protection, private citizens sometimes feel like they have to take matters into their own hands.
Which often leads to enormous and very messy legal ramifications. This brings us to the really complex case of Gregory Allen Elliott and Anita Sarkeesian, which became this landmark conflict over freedom of expression versus criminal harassment.
This story provides crucial insight into how power imbalances and narrative framing can dictate who gets labeled the victim and who gets labeled the oppressor. It starts around 2012-2013 with the feminist critic Anita Sarkeesian. She launched a Kickstarter focused on sexist tropes in video games.
And she was wildly successful.
Hugely successful. She got 25 times her initial funding goal. But despite this massive success, the narrative she started to champion focused heavily on the supposed rampant harassment she received from an organized cyber mob.
And central to that narrative was the creation of a crude flash game, Beat Up Anita Sarkeesian, which was made by a young man named Bendelin Spur.
Now, Spur had done this before. 6 years earlier, he'd created an identical crude flash game targeting Jack Thompson, who was a right-wing critic of violent video games.
And when he created the game about Thompson, a middle-aged Christian man, what happened?
Nothing. No one in the gaming community cared. The act was seen as harmless satire, but when he targeted Sarkeesian, the narrative dramatically shifted.
This is where the power imbalance becomes so acute, right? Sarkeesian was a media darling with massive funding, institutional support, powerful PR.
Right. And Spur, the guy who made the game, was, in the words of our sources, an unknown schmuck with only 8 Twitter followers.
8.
8. Yet Spur was immediately elevated to the status of a looming monster and part of an organized misogynist bully effort designed to shut down a woman's voice.
So the perception was completely disconnected from the reality of this situation.
Entirely. The person with virtually no online influence was portrayed as the powerful oppressor, while the powerful individual was framed as the helpless victim. And the retaliation against Spur was swift and devastating. A Toronto feminist named Stephanie Guthrie discovered Spur's identity, contacted his employer, and explicitly sicked the internet on him.
So that is an actual organized mobbing campaign. It was initiated by an influential public figure, and it was aimed at destroying a man's professional and personal life just because he created a piece of crude media that she and her supporters disapproved of.
The results for Spur were catastrophic. He woke up to hundreds of Twitter notifications, direct threats of physical harm, and the doxing of phone numbers of people close to him. These individuals are now afraid to even give anonymous statements about their experiences for fear of more retaliation. That is the definition of digital terror.
And this leads directly to the massive legal ramifications involving Gregory Allen Elliott. Elliott was charged with criminal harassment in Ontario based on complaints from Guthrie and another woman, Heather Riley. And this case became incredibly contentious because of the nature of the alleged harassment.
The key point, and this is detailed in the source material, is that the investigating officer acknowledged in testimony that Elliott never threatened either woman directly.
So what did he do?
His actions involved heated political disagreement and criticism of their views, which took place in the contentious atmosphere of political discourse on Twitter. But those disagreements were successfully weaponized into criminal charges.
Unbelievable.
The case spent years in the legal system, and it highlights the massive ramifications for freedom of expression in the modern digital age, especially when private disagreements are escalated to state-level criminal proceedings.
The Elliott case is a terrifying example. It proves that in the high-stakes, low-trust environment of social media, Simple disagreement, if you frame it effectively, can lead to your prosecution,
Mhm.
and that is the ultimate cost of unchecked toxicity.
So this pervasive toxicity, the lack of institutional protection from platforms, and the, high legal risks that come with engaging in online discourse, it all creates an urgent, almost existential need for new models of credible communication, media that can operate outside the volatile confines of centralized power.
And this is the crucial turning point in our deep dive, isn't it? The stage is set for a radically different approach, developed by the cybersecurity expert Alberto Daniel Hill, the Cyber Midnight Club, or CMC. This is a direct, calculated response to the high-stakes, low-trust environment we've just spent all this time detailing.
And we can define the CMC not just as a podcast, but as an anti-podcast. It intentionally rejects the conventional definitions, which often rely on high-cost, narrative-driven production. Instead, it operates as the strategically constructed, personality-driven media ecosystem. And it's focused ruthlessly on maximizing two things: topical velocity and, crucially, radical authenticity.
Let's talk about velocity because the volume is just staggering. The CMC has an anomalous episode count. It's somewhere between 737 and 745 plus episodes, depending on when you check the archives, which
Which is unheard of.
it's unheard of for traditional narrative audio, where a single polished episode can take 30 to 40 hours of production time. Research, scripting, sound design, editing. How does the CMC sustain that kind of volume?
They do it by rejecting all that costly pre- and post-production friction that's inherent in traditional podcasting. Their engine is live first. It's a continuous production cycle built for speed. The model transforms ephemeral real-time discussions, which are happening organically and spontaneously across decentralized social audio platforms, directly into permanent index content.
So platforms like Twitter Spaces, Telegram voice chats, Discord channels, they're not just for community building. They are the actual raw material.
Exactly. The source material cites an example, Saving Samantha, which documents this chaotic, real-time discussion that was immediately archived and repurposed as a numbered episode. The community core becomes the content engine. It spontaneously generates discussions that are then captured, minimally edited, indexed, and distributed.
So it minimizes time to market for sensitive content.
And it maximizes immediate relevance to a niche audience that demands up-to-the-minute threat intelligence.
This structure is designed for maximum efficiency and speed. But to maintain a volume of over 700 episodes without breaking the bank on bandwidth and storage, the technical choices must also support this high velocity, especially on platforms like YouTube, which is essential for global reach and monetization.
That's where the technical brilliance really lies. To keep costs low and maximize efficiency on YouTube, the CMC uses static or extremely low-motion imagery for its video uploads.
On the surface, that seems like a simple, maybe even a low-effort choice, but technically, that provides a massive built-in advantage.
Oh, it's technically genius for this specific model. Video compression relies heavily on detecting changes between frames. The codec, it analyzes one frame and then it just records the changes or the delta in the next frame.
Okay.
So if you use static images, say a constant branded logo or a low motion visualizer, the changed pixel data between consecutive frames is essentially zero.
So the resulting file size and the computational resources you need to encode and distribute that video are dramatically reduced.
Substantially reduced. This is a key technical decision that ensures the continuous operation of their high-velocity content machine. They get access to YouTube's massive global reach and monetization capabilities without the production overhead that comes with complex, high-motion video.
That level of technical optimization allows them to scale their content production vertically, far beyond what a conventional podcast could ever hope to sustain. The CMC structure is optimized for speed, but the sources stress that the real, irreplaceable engine is the profound, almost unparalleled credibility of the host, Alberto Daniel Hill. His identity, his history, his expertise. They serve as the foundation for the entire ecosystem.
We should probably establish his hard credentials first. Hill is a career professional, a computer engineer who graduated in 2003 with over 20 years in information security, ethical hacking, and digital forensics. He holds international certifications like ISO IEC 27000, and he's the author of the book Operations Bitcoins, Log Into Hell. So that's the institutional authority.
But what the sources emphasize as his true expertise, and what's most compelling to his specific niche audience, is the knowledge he got outside of those formal structures.
Exactly. He emphasizes that his most valuable security and hacking knowledge was entirely self-taught. through intense curiosity and relentless investigation, not from a formal college education. For an audience that's fundamentally skeptical of traditional institutions, of credentials, of centralized authority, the hacker, digital rights, and anti-censorship communities, this self-taught narrative is incredibly strategic.
It reinforces his identity as an authentic expert.
Who earned his stripes in the field, not in the classroom.
And here's where his personal story becomes the podcast's most potent strategic asset: the narrative of conflict and trauma. Hill's core story involves him being the first person in Uruguay incarcerated for a computer-related crime. And he consistently maintains to this day that this was a wrongful incarceration for a crime that perhaps never happened.
And this event was profoundly physically and psychologically traumatic for him. The experience resulted in a medically induced coma and, tragically, the significant life-altering loss of millions in cryptocurrency assets back in 2017. If you look at the psychological profile from his public posts, he describes this as life-altering trauma that left scars forever in my life, mind, heart. The experience led directly to PTSD and depression.
And he transforms this pain into an explicit strategy for his audience. He describes how he manages his psychological condition by programming his brain for resilience. So the trauma, the persecution by the state, it transforms him from a respected, certified professional into a symbol of anti-establishment resilience and victimhood.
This narrative is strategic genius within his niche. It effectively decouples his technical authority from any traditional corporate or governmental structures. When you're discussing dark web investigations or government surveillance or platform failures, his history of persecution dramatically increases his credibility among those anti-censorship and hacktivism audiences.
He's not a corporate shill or a government operative.
Right. His trauma becomes his global mission for justice. It provides a radical authenticity that, manufactured media or hosts who haven't paid this price simply cannot replicate.
That makes perfect sense. The credibility is earned through fire. And to complement this rigorous technical credibility in this profound personal narrative, the CMC incorporates a unique rhetorical device we see in the sources. This playful speculation linking Hill to the silent guardians of the analog.
This is a conceptual device. It's a piece of intellectual theater, really. It references a supposed organization that's dedicated to preserving non-digital knowledge and critically understanding the fundamental human element and psychological context outside of purely technological advancements.
So why does a digital forensics expert who's analyzing CSAM networks need a sort of mythical layer?
It functions strategically. It transforms what could be dry, complex digital forensics, which could otherwise sound like a textbook reading into compelling narrative storytelling. It satisfies that audience demand for binge-worthy true crime and documentary content, while at the same time deepening the brand's philosophical engagement.
It gives a mythical layer to the hardcore technical analysis.
It does. It implies that Hill understands that technology is only one part of the battle. The analog, human, and moral elements are equally, or perhaps more, important. It's narrative structure for complex security analysis.
With that high-velocity structure and the host's radical authenticity established, the CMC is perfectly positioned to handle extremely sensitive, high-stakes content. They focus on three core thematic clusters that require maximum trust and investigative sensitivity.
The first cluster is digital extremism. They provide this granular, detailed forensic analysis of violent extremist groups operating online. Notably, the show spent significant time covering the dangerous 764 network, which was characterized by the distribution of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, and an underlying ideology of just pure nihilism and sadism.
And the analysis wasn't just theoretical, was it? The sources confirmed this forensic analysis was instrumental, leading to real-world operational responses.
Absolutely. The threat intelligence provided by the show linked directly to over 250 FBI investigations and extensive global dismantling efforts.
That is real-world impact rooted in trust and technical rigor, far beyond what traditional media typically provides.
The second cluster is digital vigilantism, focusing on groups like Anonymous, which, often operate in an ethically gray area.
Right.
The CMC conducts in-depth analysis of campaigns like Op Child Safety, detailing the group's goals of exposing predators and advocating for legislative reform. But what's crucial is that the show maintains its radical authenticity by refusing to paint the vigilantes as pure heroes. They explore the ethical ambiguities and the very real legal repercussions faced by participants. For example, they discuss the prison time served by members involved in high-profile actions like the Scientology attacks, showing the real costs of activism.
So they're providing the full spectrum, the moral imperative on one side versus the legal consequence on the other. And finally, drawing directly from Hill's personal history of legal persecution, the third cluster is legal reform and sovereignty. The podcast acts as a major amplifier for legislative advocacy.
And here we see discussions focused on specific political and technological failures, often amplified for a Latin American audience. A key example is their analysis of Uruguay's digital sovereignty battle, combating corporate censorship with labor law and algorithmic transparency.
That's fascinating. So they're linking these complex, abstract technological issues like algorithm bias and platform governance to tangible, real-world issues like labor rights and national sovereignty. And they maintain an impartial yet deeply critical approach, often using sarcasm to address what they view as these ridiculous political situations.
They are essentially translating complex digital law into public discourse, and they're using their own personal trauma as the anchor point for why reform is so necessary.
Given the extreme sensitivity and the often high legal risk associated with this content, from detailed dark web dismantling efforts to discussions of government surveillance distribution resilience is paramount. The CMC cannot afford to be silenced or removed.
Which necessitates a layered architecture that anticipates platform failure. And this is something Hill's technical background allows him to engineer perfectly. The sources highlight the inherent vulnerability of relying solely on centralized platforms like YouTube.
Why is YouTube specifically a vulnerability beyond just the general censorship risk?
Because of its structure. YouTube defines its podcasts as specialized playlists that lack a universal exportable RSS feed.
Oh.
This means the platform retains total institutional control. If YouTube decided the content violated some ambiguous policy, they could, in theory, just take away your podcast, severing the connection to your audience permanently. They own the distribution channel.
So Hill mitigates this platform dependence by building a layered architecture designed for survival. He makes the platform merely one broadcast layer, not the foundation. So we have the independent RSS feed, which is the archive.
That traditional structure, distributed across Apple, Spotify, other feed readers, that provides the unbreakable connection with subscribers and institutional longevity. This is the permanent record. This is where the 737-plus episode master library resides, immune to the editorial decisions of a single video hosting site.
And then there's the community core, which is the engine for generating all the content.
These are the decentralized platforms, Telegram, Discord, and Nextbasis. They're indispensable because they generate the sensitive, high-trust, real-time content, that live-first environment. And for the truly highly sensitive discussions, like those regarding active government surveillance or security investigations, they sometimes require an immediate, spontaneous migration to encrypted peer-to-peer platforms like Signal.
That final step, migrating to Signal, is a really powerful demonstration of credibility, isn't it? It tells the audience, this information is so hot we cannot risk discussing it on a centralized platform.
It reinforces Hill's identity as a pragmatic security figure. The entire system is built to generate content in a high-trust, decentralized setting, broadcast it widely and efficiently via YouTube using technical optimization, and then archive it permanently via the RSS feed. It ensures maximum resilience against censorship and platform failure.
The CMC's success is a complete blueprint.
Yeah.
It really shows how a high-trust niche media operation can weaponize narrative authenticity, optimize for archival velocity, their essential live-to-archive model, and strategically ensure distribution resilience against the volatility and censorship of centralized platforms.
What stands out to me most powerfully here is the seamless synthesis of the two halves of this deep dive. We began with the microaggressions and the highly organized, rhetorically shielded bullying of troll Twitter, which escalates so quickly to these macro consequences.
Libelous claims that destroy lives, job losses.
Exactly. And fraught years-long legal cases like Gregory Allen Elliott's. It just demonstrates the urgent existential stakes of online discourse.
And the anti-podcast model is the direct, logical consequence of realizing that the digital world is a high-stakes, low-trust environment where centralized platforms offer no reliable protection. Alberto Daniel Hill's success lies in his ability to channel profound, life-altering trauma his experience of injustice, incarceration, and loss into radical, unassailable transparency.
He took that personal history and used his technical expertise to build this robust, low-cost, high-velocity infrastructure that leverages community trust and efficiency. And all of that is to ensure the longevity and reach of his content, entirely independent of the regulatory whims of major tech companies. He basically built a media fortress.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider, especially given the platform failures we've outlined today. If centralized platforms struggle so profoundly to regulate high-level, targeted harassment and provide reliable protection, should creators whose work requires dealing with sensitive, high-conflict topics, whether they are journalists or critics or cybersecurity experts, should they always just assume the system will fail? Should they always build a resilient media fortress, like the Cyber Midnight Club, rather than trusting the centralized platforms for long-term survival? It suggests that resilience, not compliance or hope, might be the only viable future for high-trust niche content in the digital age.